Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me. My name is Ryan Beesmer. I'm with the Rawls Group as an associate succession planner. I'm here today to talk with you guys about communication, active listening. How do we practice active listening? What is active listening? Why is it important? Why does it matter? How can it help you in business? I don't know. If it's something that you struggle with. How do you get better at it? These are all really important questions. So we'll start off at the top here. What is active listening? And I think the most succinct description I've seen for this is listening to understand, not to respond. Think about a time when you were talking with somebody and you could almost see them talking before you finished your thought. You could sense that all that they were doing was waiting to fire back whatever their rebuttal was to what you were saying. You didn't really feel like whatever you were saying got through to them. That's passive listening, right? You say something and what I'm thinking about in my mind is what I'm gonna say back to you. I'm not thinking about in my mind what you just said or questioning anything that you put out there. I'm simply gonna fire right back at you. So why is that bad, right? It just quick fire, right? We're like having a debate. Why is that bad? If you can think of that situation where you knew someone wasn't really listening to you, right? You made a comment, you're in a conversation, and somebody else is already talking before you finished even speaking. And I like to think about how that made you feel. Probably not very good. Probably like you weren't listened to. And I think about now in business, as leaders, as managers, it's important that we have people that report to us that think that we are, or know that we're listening when they come and talk to us. Even more so, we gotta have bosses that feel like we're listening when they're talking to us. And so that's gonna be the focus of this video, is just talking about how you can practice active listening a little bit more, develop it, because like anything, it's a skill. Maybe there are some people born innately with the ability to actively listen. They call them introverted. I'm just kidding. If you're an avid athlete or you go work out or do anything, maybe musical, artistic, you understand or hopefully understand the value of practice. I think about Steph Curry, didn't walk out of the womb shooting threes. You know what I mean? Probably put in well more than the 10,000 hours before he was, a pro basketball player who could, break NBA records for numbers of threes shot in a season or 3-point percentage in a career. And so just like shooting threes is a skill, active listening, shutting up and let other people talk and get their points across is also a skill. We live in a society today where we're kind of constantly bombarded with messages and marketing and ads and opinions and news, all of this stuff that's constantly bombarding us in our news feeds. It's really easy to just, kind of become a little bit squirrel brained where my thought is just on whatever's next. It's not really in the moment or listening to what someone's having to say to me. But, if you are getting feedback from a boss, right? Understanding and really getting to the root of understanding what the feedback is or how you could do better. And that really comes down to active listening, or you're having a subordinate who's really been unable to meet some of the expectations that you have for them. And I think it's really important, again, to get down to the bottom of it by practicing some active listening. So I think that really speaks to a lot of why this is important in business. Suffice it to say that if you work in any type of industry where you need to gain clients, right? Where you're trying to convince people to work with you, I guarantee you that not listening to what they're saying is probably the quickest way to get shown the door. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some signs that you might not be great at this. I think kind of a low-hanging fruit sign that you may not be a great active listener is that if this is your first time ever hearing about active listening, then I would absolutely say you're probably not very great at it and it could use some practice. That's not to say like we're all not naturally good at it. Some people are naturally contemplative and curious minded, and they may have a really good ability to actively listen without ever hearing that. But I think there's probably a pretty big cross section of folks who haven't ever worried about active listening and probably not very good at it. So that's a kind of a one-off there. But if you find yourself often in conversations that escalate frequently, or you sense things coming to blows often, or they often end in disagreement where you're not able to see eye to eye or not able to come to a resolution or a compromise, if you find yourself having the same conversation multiple times, if you're a parent and your kids say, I don't think you're listening to me, or you're not listening, then good examples of signs that you might have some work to do on active listening. So how do you improve? I think, watching this video might tell me that you're genuinely interested in improving. And I think that's the most important part. It's like any skill, right? Like you can't trip and fall and accidentally learn how to shoot 3-pointers like Steph Curry does. You have to try. And so just like that with active listening, you have to try and you have to be committed to growing and learning how to do it. So I think that's first most important. And don't expect big changes quick. Sometimes when you hear something like this and you think, oh, I can do that today. But you may not be as good at it right away as you expect yourself. So give yourself some grace, right? Understand that over time you'll get better at it. And even the best practitioners will struggle at times. The number one tip for getting better at active listening is simply asking questions. I think it sounds so simple in the idea, but the reality of it is, if someone makes a statement and you then just make a statement on top of it, all of a sudden you're just kind of stacking statements, whatever that conversation looks like. Whereas if someone makes a statement and you ask them, well, tell me more about that, or what makes you say that, you're able to really dive into, what they're talking about, get a better understanding for yourself. And then again, it's the practice of asking questions that will help develop your ability as an active listener. What I've noticed, I'll speak from my personal experience here as I've gone through this journey of trying to become a better active listener. It really started with my previous role as a people leader. I had 12 people that worked for me, and I was trying to make sure that we were achieving certain goals as a team. And a lot of times personal stuff gets in the way of that. A lot of times messaging or cross wires can get in the way of that. And so in that process, trying to learn to become a better active listener and sitting down with my employees, what I was able to understand was that throughout training and throughout the time of my team, they had felt like they had gotten some mixed messaging about different things, about different metrics or performance things that we did at my old company. It made them feel very anxious and tenuous about their position. They felt like any day they could walk in and get fired because they were either not able to hit a certain metric or what have you. And by me actively listening to this conversation and asking them questions about, well, what makes you think that? Well, how did you come to this conclusion? We're able to come to an understanding that, their expectations were a little overblown for what the consequences might be for maybe failing to meet metrics for a day or so. And they really turned it around from that point. They were able to understand where we were coming from as an organization, what our goals were, and that, they could breathe a little bit more easy. And I bring up that situation just to say that, as a leader, the ability to ask good questions is, again, a skill. And being able to, in the moment, know which questions to ask can be really challenging. But if you are making a really good habit of consistently asking questions in conversations, maybe it's just a conversation with your spouse or your best friend, if you're making a concerted effort to ask more questions, what happens is this almost innate ability develops within you where you'll almost know the right question to ask when it comes up. When somebody brings an issue to you, or when you're having a conversation with somebody, with enough repetition, you start to understand, this is the question I need to ask right now. We're going to get to a good place if we talk about this. And before you know it, you're just actively listening to everything that you're doing. You're trying to understand what people are saying to you more. You're trying to dive deeper into their thoughts and what they've brought to the table. And as business leaders, this is critical, right? I want to understand what a potential client is really concerned about. I don't want to just think this client is like every other client, and so they're going to want to, pay for our services because every other client has paid for our services. No, this client is unique. They have very important reasons that they've come to us or that they've reached out to us. And I need to do a good job of making sure that I ask questions and understand fully where they're coming from. And maybe if I do a good job of that, they'll do business with us. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's something that's going to take practice, but it's probably one of the most valuable skills as a human in our society that you can have when it comes to being empathetic and developing relationships with other people. When other people start to see how much you care about these things, how much you ask questions about this stuff, they'll gravitate towards you because they understand that if they really need to talk to you, that you're going to be there for them. But even as a leader in business, professionals will feel more comfortable coming to talk to you about different things that are impacting their ability to do their job. You're able to communicate better with your leaders. All around, I think it makes a big impact. And so I'll leave you with this then: practice.